welcome to the British Museum's Knowledge Share Spring Event Series 2021. These events seek to build on some of the conversations that were held at our National Programmes Conference in 2019, which explored equality and diversity in UK museum practice. We're delighted to host so many contributors from across the UK's cultural heritage sector, including several returning speakers from our 2019 conference. I'm grateful to the Vivmar Foundation for their long-term and valuable support of the Knowledge Share program, which has made these events possible. And I thank you all for joining us as we explore the ways in which museums and heritage organizations have adapted to the profound changes of 2020 and look ahead to the changes yet to come.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's brilliant to have so many of you here. I'm just going to run through some housekeeping before we can get started. So this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the BM Events YouTube channel afterwards, so you can catch up on anything. But for now, we're filming live and we'd love for you guys to get involved. So the chat function is open. Please do get the conversation going. We want to create a safe environment for discussion and sharing ideas. So please follow the museum's code of conduct, which is protect privacy, please don't share anyone's personal information, stay on topic, and please be respectful. So I'm sure you're looking forward to getting started. So I'm going to hand over to Afzal, who will introduce our brilliant speakers to the stage.
Hello, I'm Afzal Khan and I will be your host for today. Welcome to the 9th event of the Knowledge Share Spring Event Series. Thank you for joining us. Please do get comfortable as we're in for a treat. Museum Space Invaders is a campaign for change for women in museums and heritage, set up by Andrea Cunningham, Babs Guthrie, Sharon Heal, Polly Richards, Melissa Strauss, and Sarah Wajid. We're delighted to have Sharon and Melissa leading the session today, together with Dhikshana Turakhia Pering as keynote speaker. Sharon Heal is the director of the Museums Association, a campaigning membership body that promotes the value of museums to society. She is also the chair of the Museum of Homelessness and a trustee of the European Museum Forum and the Thackeray Museum of Medicine. Melissa Strauss works in policy for the National Lottery Heritage Fund, focusing on intangible cultural heritage and memories and youth engagement. She is currently undertaking a research project on participation in museum decision-making, supported by the AHRC, and sits on the steering group for the East End Women's Museum in London. Dhikshana Turakhia Pering is a head of engagement and skills at Somerset House in London. She is an active member in the Museum Detox Network, a trustee of the Museums Association, and also one of the judges for the European Museum of the Year Award. A warm welcome to Sharon, Melissa, and Dhikshana. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us today. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, and welcome to everybody who's joining us from all four corners of the UK today. As Afzal said, I'm Sharon. I'm the director of the Museums Association and one of the founders of Museum Space Invaders. I wanted to say a couple of thank yous to the British Museum and Georgia for hosting and producing this series, and also to Jen, who's doing the captioning. Please do use the chat to introduce yourself. I know people are popping up on the chat as we speak, and ask any questions in the chat and make any comments, give us any feedback. This event is for women who are feeling blocked, unsure and thwarted in their career, in their personal life maybe, in their professional life, in their institution. And reflecting over the last 12 to 14 months, I think we've probably all felt a little bit blocked, unsure and thwarted by the challenges that we've faced. This session has been run by Museum Space Invaders, and it's about trying to unlock our power. We're going to hear from Mel in a minute, who's going to say more about Museum Space Invaders, and then we've got a keynote from Dhikshana. I just wanted to say a few words first about feminist leadership, because we talk a lot about it and we're often asked, what does it actually mean? There are different definitions of feminist leadership, but for me it means 5 things. Practice what you preach, which is just as simple as putting your money where your mouth is. Redefine success and hard work, what that looks like. It's not all about the coalface and the 9 to 5 and the extra hours. Share power and credit. It shouldn't be about me, and I. Build networks, community and relationships. And we're building one now for women in the sector, for feminists. And mentor, develop and empower yourself and your team. And for me, all of that is based on two simple principles and values around social justice and equality. So that's what feminist leadership means to me. Please put in the chat what you think feminist leadership means to you, and think about also, importantly, how you might enact it. So I'm going to facilitate today's conversation, and we're on a very, very tight to the minute timetable. We want to have that time later for the interactive workshop and for the breakout spaces. But I want to start by introducing Mel Strauss, one of the founders of Museum Space Invaders, who's going to talk a little bit more about what we do. Over to you, Mel.
Thanks, Sharon. Hi, everyone. I'm Mel from Space Invaders. I'm just briefly going to talk about Space Invaders, our manifesto, and what we're doing. So to start with, Space Invaders is an intersectional feminist campaign. Our purpose is to claim equal space for women in museums and heritage. We want equal power and influence, with more women leading our institutions and more feminist leadership too. Fair conditions with day-to-day working life designed to meet our needs, and our stories told with real representation in collections, narratives, and displays. At the moment, as Afzal mentioned, we have a central committee of 6 people that founded Space Invaders in 2016. And over the last 5 years, we've engaged with hundreds of people in the museums and heritage sector, mainly through events like this and many that we've organised as well. And I'll tell you about our next event in a minute too. But we're also a growing movement. Space Invaders sister groups have recently launched in Scotland and the north of England, with networks for those areas. And we're keen to see more groups emerge to cover the UK. Everything we do is centred around our manifesto, which we launched last year. The manifesto itself is based on what you and other women have told us and sets out our demands for equality. These demands are equal power, about leadership in museums and heritage, and about reflecting the wider population too. So it's about a diversity of women holding their share of influence. We want to see more women in the top roles. We want to see more representative governance, especially with chairs as well. But it's not just about the numbers, it's also about the style of leadership, as Sharon mentioned before. Fair conditions is about workplaces and conditions that are designed to meet the needs of women. This includes equal pay and no gender pay gap, flexibility with caring responsibilities supported for all staff and all dependents, and safe spaces free of sexism. Our Stories Told is about the representation of women in collections, narratives, and displays. Women's history and perspectives should be reflected in all museum and historic sites. Art and design by women should be equally represented in acquisitions and displays. We also want to see wider gender equality issues highlighted through interpretation, exhibitions, and events. Our programs should engage with issues women face. We have an action plan, and we're doing what we can to address the demands. Our plan mainly draws on 3 types of activity: gathering and sharing information and ideas, campaigning, and supporting people to create change. I'll share just a few of the things that we've done. So we're building a knowledge hub on our website with a repository for relevant research, articles, and other links. We're creating baselines by gathering and analysing data on the makeup of boards, chairs, directors, and conditions, including the gender pay gap. We've supported the Global Grace research that's led by Normal Power at Goldsmiths University, which is looking at women's experiences of leadership roles in the sector. We're looking at ideas and practice around feminist leadership, mainly through our podcast. The first 3 episodes of that are available now and have interviews with Normal Power, with Adele Patrick from Glasgow Women's Library, and with Rachel Crossley from the East End Women's Museum. And the next 3 podcasts will be uploaded in the next few months. They're being recorded at the moment. We're also running a pilot mentoring program in partnership with Museum Detox, Museum as Muck, and the Shift Group of Women Leaders. While our manifesto focuses on representation in leadership, we all know that this is not just about people in the top positions. We need people to lead change, and this can happen from where we are. The feminist Rebecca Solnit writes about hope. She points out that we don't know what will happen. Things are not predetermined. And in that uncertainty, there is room to act. She says, when you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes. You alone, or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. Today, we're thinking about what we'd like to be different, what we'd like to achieve, and unlocking the power we all have to influence that change. There's just one more thing from me. I wanted to keep it quite brief before we hear from Dhikshana and then get a chance to talk to each other about keeping in touch. Please do follow us on Twitter at @MSpaceInvaders. Sign up to our newsletter at mspaceinvaders.com. Join a sister group. As I mentioned, we've got one in Scotland and the north of England. Or do get in touch if you'd be interested in starting one in your own region or country. Our next event, as I mentioned, will be on the 5th of July, and it's about demystifying boards and encouraging more women to become involved in governance. Come along if you'd like to know more about becoming a trustee and affecting change on the board. The details are on Eventbrite now, I think just under Space Invaders. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mel. It's always great and actually refreshing to hear a little bit of our history as a group of women in the sector, as a group of feminists who've really campaigned for change and I think achieved a fair, modest amount over the last couple of years. That event that's coming up on women and boards has got an absolutely banging lineup. We had a meeting of Space Invaders last night and decided our dream list of who we wanted as speakers, trustees, and women who've really made change at trustee level in every sort of shape and size of organisation. So please do join us on the 5th of July for that event. So we just bang on time now, which is great for me as a facilitator. So I'm really delighted to introduce Dhikshana, who is, as well as being a board member of the Museums Association and an active member of Museum Detox, the head of skills and engagement at Somerset House. Over to you, Dhikshana.
Great, thank you very much, Sharon. So hello, everybody, and thank you for having me today. It's a real privilege. I'm going to kick off with my talk by starting with a very important woman in my life. So if I could have the first slide, that'd be great. I am Dhikshana Turakhia Pering. I am head of engagement skills at Somerset House. I am a trustee. I'm a part member of Museum Detox, but I'm also lots of other things. And those lots of other things about me are made by the women that brought me up. So before I can talk about unlocking power, I need to introduce you to someone who I think about a lot when I think about power. This is Yashoda Patel, otherwise known as Dadi, which is Gujarati for grandma, my grandma, and she sadly passed away at the end of 2020. But she immigrated to London from Bombay in 1960, leaving her family and country to give her 3 daughters more. She had many difficult and hard moments, but in the hope that the future generations of her family would live happy and successful lives. She had less power than I have in my life right now, but any power I have is because of her. And I have thought about this a lot over the last few years, but especially since she passed away in December. The thing is her power came from taking a very big risk of leaving everything that was safe and known to her. I asked her about this at this very moment at her 90th birthday after the champagne cork hit me in the head. And I asked her, is this what she imagined her 90 years old, this is what her life would be? She said, no. How could I have imagined this in 1927 or during the years I lived in India when I was born, that I'd be living in this tower block with my granddaughter and her, white husband and all of these things. Like, you can't predict these things about your future. But she said, even the hardships, even the difficult things, she's really glad that she took that risk. She did also say that she did wish that she was a great grandmother by the time she was 90. What me and her didn't know that in this picture, I was actually pregnant at the time. She really made an impact on me. I spent a lot of time growing up with her. But I also think that any risk I take or any way that I do in my personal professional life to try and move myself forward will never be as much as her. So I have no excuse. My Dadi changed the way that I think about power and also how I think about representation. Growing up, I spent a lot of time with her because my mum used to work a lot. I was immersed in Indian culture. And as I got older and made friends, I was immersed in the culture of Northwest London, particularly Camden. I battled with the clash of being both Indian and British. But when I was doing my A-levels, I studied Zadie Smith's White Teeth. For the first time, I saw myself represented as the person I was with that battle of India and Britain. I also chose to study Indian independence as my A-level coursework because I wanted to study about my family history and where I came from, and I hadn't studied it up until that point. In hindsight, I can see that from an early age, I took power into my own hands and gave myself the representation I wanted in the spaces I was in. I had more power at 18 than my dadi had in her whole life. This idea of power has continued and implemented the way I work. If I could have the next slide, thank you. And has continued into my work in learning about in the work of learning and engagement. That is what my career is focused on. For me, there is so much that we do as individuals, but to unlock power, to really unlock it, you need the support of others, and you should be unlocking it not just for yourself, but for others. In 2019, I was asked what my approach to learning and engagement was. Being dyslexic and a visual person, I came up with this flowchart. The phases of engagement, DTP style, take that as you will. There are 4 stages in my perception of what learning and engagement. Participation, where you say to someone, come take part in this event we've put on. Engagement, which is come take part in this event, but there is something for you to add to it or take away from it. Co-production, still the buzzword that we hear, which is I want to create an event, but I'm not going to create it on my own. I'm going to work with a group, a community, a group of young people that I want to develop this with. And for me, the final stage is power, which is when someone comes to you and goes, you're not representing me or my voice or my thoughts or my ideas. And I have this idea. And you go, okay, well, that's great. Let's see how we make that happen. This model is not revolutionary, but the most important part of it is power. In the last 2 examples of co-production power, both can only happen when groups come together, when people come together and you make it happen together. But what the difference is who has the power, who is holding the power, and who is willing to give it up. Fundamentally, it's all about collaboration. So now that I've set the scene on where I've come from and the important women in my life to the work that I do, I want to go through my life and my career and focus in on power, on areas of my career where I found power, where I've lost power, and where I've kind of accelerated power, and also reflect on what I've learned from there. So if we could have the next slide, that'd be great. I'm going to start at the start of my paid career in the sector, which was my first ever role was being an explainer at the Science Museum, working on the interactive galleries, doing hands-on live science shows. It was great. And during that time, I was doing my master's in museum and gallery education, and I did an internship with the outreach team at the Science Museum. And during that summer of doing that internship, a member of the team left and a role came up, and the manager in the team said, you should apply. And I said, oh, but I've not been here very long. And, you know, people are usually explainers for a number of years before they move on. And he said, you should apply. Like, I think you'd be great at it. And there's no harm in not applying. So I applied. And it says here that I got the job, but it was the worst interview in my life. And you're going to say, oh, you probably thought it was the worst interview in your life. But the thing is when I was offered the job, the manager said, that was the worst interview I've ever done. But you know what? I see potential in you and I know how hard you can work and I'm willing to give you that chance. He took the power that he had in that position to give me a chance, but he also made me realize that he was giving me that chance. So I worked really hard. And it was a life-changing moment for me because I then spent 3 years in that team learning the skills and the experiences I needed to get. I met my husband, I progressed in my career, I got married, I eventually had a son with my husband that I met. So in that very small act of offering me a job when I probably shouldn't have got it, he gave me power and he empowered me. And I can see that in hindsight. And he changed my life personally and professionally. And I carry that forward in everything that I do. So from the Science Museum, after 7.5 years there, I moved to the London Transport Museum because my passion and interest was really in kind of developing people, was working with young people, thinking about co-production. And as a born and bred Londoner, I love the London Underground and its design. So it was a perfect museum to move to. But it was at the London Transport Museum that I found my voice and power because of what I did outside of work, but it also did impact what I did inside of work. 5 key things happened when I was at the London Transport Museum. I found the Museum Detox Network and joined it. I got a mentor. I became a trustee for the Museums Association. I attended the CLAW leadership course, and I also became a mama. They all start with M except CLAW. So if CLAW could change his name to more, then that would be alliteration and that would be great. But all of these things, networks are important, but the people in the networks are what make them great and give you power. Basically, you should always feel that you walk into any space, meeting, event, anything that you're doing with 200 people behind you that can back you, that can support you, that can help you sort out a dilemma that you're having. My career propelled when I found networks outside of my day job and my personal life, but they also complemented those parts of me. Museum Detox was a safe space. I didn't know I needed a safe space, but as a British Indian woman, as I was progressing through my career, rising up, I did need that. I needed a place where people felt like me when they sat around certain tables or went to certain events or went to meetings. I needed a space where to find mentors and friendship with people that looked and understood me. The Museums Association, I have been a member for since I was at university. My membership may have lapsed a few times, Sharon, but I did renew it. And then with the mentor from Museum Detox, who was Sarah Wajid, I said, oh, the Museums Association are looking for trustees. Maybe this would be a good career development thing and great to be part of something bigger. And Sarah Wajid, I will never forget this, said, you should apply. And I said, but I probably won't get elected. She went, no, not enough people know you, but your name will get out there. I remember receiving the email from Sharon saying I'd been elected and panicking and calling Sarah and telling her, well, now I have to do it. And she was like, oh yeah, you have to do it. So, you got in there. And the Museum Association board was a lovely board to join. I'm not just saying that because Sharon is sitting there, but it didn't remove the self-doubt I had or the worry I had about doing that, about not being a museum director. At the time, I was a learning officer, about not feeling experienced or having all the right language or having looked at the right budgets. And I really felt that lack of confidence. And I did find my voice, and I will talk more about that in a second. But when I did find that voice, I realized that it had to be in its truest form. That's who I am, and that's why I was there. That's why I was elected. And I brought a different perspective and a different way to think about the things that we were discussing at board level. I no longer saw myself gate crashing something I shouldn't be at, but adding to it, but also gaining from it. And then what happened, as soon as I accepted that, it grew my networks, my connections. And in my day job, I came in with that power and that knowledge and the experience and the connections from doing that role as well. It definitely takes time to not feel like you're not meant to be around a table. But however hard a board tries to do that, it still has to be your own responsibility to kind of move forward from that when you get to that point. And it was during that same time I applied to be on core leadership because I felt that lack of kind of being able to be myself in these spaces that all of a sudden I had the privilege to be in. And it was on my core leadership course where we talked about owning who you are and being authentic, but also being given the tools and techniques to do that. And what is really important that I took away from that is it's much easier to be myself and bring that to the table than try and pretend to be something else and then try and feed in the things that I think that needs to happen. I'm the right person for the job because it's me, not because I'm trying to be someone else. And Claude also gave me 25 people at the end of a WhatsApp chain where I can sometimes share ideas or thoughts and vice versa. They do that. Sometimes we share baby pictures. Sometimes we just talk about whatever we want to talk about. But it gave me another network. So I had lots of spaces and places to go to sense check things that I was doing. All of those things really helped me achieve something that is the saddest and proudest thing that I will ever do in my career. I'm probably writing myself out of lots of jobs here. So, probably not a good idea to say that, but it's true. All of it led me to create the Khadija Sayo Fellowship. So Khadija Sire was part of a program I ran called the Young Freelancers. She was also an amazing artist. She passed away in the Grenfell fire with her mother. And when that happened, it was very difficult for many people. And I was thinking, what can we do to remember her or to do something that has a reason, not just like a kind of a memoriam. And that's where we came up with the Khadija Sire Photography Fellowship. It's a legacy for her. It's empowering other young women and people of color to go into the world of photography and culture. And in proposing that idea, I felt confident and I felt powerful, but that's because I had Museum Detox behind me. I had all my experience in being in the Museums Association, my core leadership. And when I presented it, it was, yes, let's do that. That came with confidence. Would I have done it if I didn't have those things? I don't know, because I did have those things. But I definitely know that I and myself felt really comfortable and confident in saying this is what we should do and enabling that to happen. But sometimes the thing is your power can be blocked, it can be lost. And that happened to me shortly after leaving the London Transport Museum. So if I could have the next slide, please. I moved to Brent 2020, where I was a young people's producer. And if you're feeling not empowered, you can try and make a change. You can try and find it. You can work out how you want to get that and for the work you want to do. But that isn't always possible. And it took me a very long time to understand that, and at the sacrifice of my own well-being. But that's the thing, you shouldn't sacrifice your own well-being. Not even all the power in the world with whatever good you are going to do is any good if it's affecting you personally. So Brent 2020 program was all about me. It was about Northwest London. It was about Zadie Smith. It was about Jerben Desai. So I connected with it and I was so excited about it. But it was also a place where over a year, my power and strength that I'd built at the London Transport Museum over that time was broken, and it plummeted. And walking away seemed weak to me. I thought, I can't walk away. I've got to keep trying. But then I heard something. Someone said something to me, which is, you shouldn't really listen to your head or your heart. You should listen to your gut. And I realized that to walk away was not weak, because I was prioritizing myself, my son, my husband, my mother, Dadi, all the people in my life that were important, that were not seeing me and also seeing me suffer as well. And that idea of listening to your gut is actually your ancestors punching you in the gut, saying, you know what, I didn't do all this stuff. I didn't immigrate from India and leave all that stuff for you to sit there and take that on and not look after yourself. And so walking away is not weak if you can try and make those changes. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're no good to anyone if you can't look after your well-being. And so at the end of that, I moved at the start of 2020 to Somerset House to become the head of engagement and skills as a pandemic engulfed the world. It's my first senior role as a head of department. And I got to know Somerset House in the strangest of times, not in a normal time at all, in the way we program and we work and the emotions of what everyone in the world was going through. But it's a space where I have been able to build up my power reserves after what happened in 2019. I have been tested, but I also have been given the space to accelerate my power, to make decisions. I had program ideas that I thought would take 3 years, but we've achieved them in a year. I've been able to lead on our anti-racism pledge. It's a real space where they want people to be, everyone, whatever level you're at Somerset House, to have, you know, power to do the best work you want to do and also live your best lives. And I'm so proud to be part of it, and really excited of what will happen as the world opens up. Being part of networks that still support me, that enable me to live happy and successful lives. I'm still part of Museum Detox. I'm still a trustee for the Museum Association. I still have those claw things, but they're all there supporting me while I'm at my best, which means I can shift up a gear and do even more, because my well-being is in check as well. So in the same way that the work of learning and engagement never ends, society is changing, needs are changing. What we need and want will change across our lives. So how I work now, the power I have now, the things I want to do now is very different to even 2 years ago, and it will be very different in 2 years' time. And I think it's that idea of constantly just checking, is this right for me, as well much as what you're trying to do and the impact you're going to have. So in writing this presentation, I thought I'd create a checklist, which kind of overlaps with Sharon's list at the start, but there's a few other things in there as well. The first is to connect with networks, but you're actually connecting with people. That is the important part of it. You need to listen to your gut because it speaks the truth. I mean, it tells you when you're hungry, so of course it's going to be right? Be brilliant, be yourself and own it, whatever that means to you, and don't try and be something else because it's exhausting to be something that isn't you. It's okay to walk away. That is powerful in itself. And share the power, because when you have it, that's the most important thing that you should be doing. Now, when I was asked to deliver this speech or this talk, I thought about other women that we all know that would have impact. And I thought, you know, the person that really helped me through 2019, along with Dadi, was the Queen, Michelle Obama. So I want to end with 2 quotes from her. And the importance of these quotes is Michelle is trying to tell us to think about our whole selves, but also to be our kind of own ourselves. So the first quote is, we are all strengthening the character of the Black youth across America, but we also needed rather desperately to get to Watertower Palace before the K-Swiss sneaker sale ended. Because yes, we need to do good work, we need to do hard work, but we also need to enjoy our lives and sometimes just buy those trainers. And the second quote, which is, I was a child of the mainstream, and this was an asset. Barack sometimes referred to me as Joe Public, asking me to weigh in on a campaign slogans and strengths and strategies, knowing that I kept myself happily steeped in popular culture. All of this is to say that I saw ways to connect with Americans that Barack and his West Wing advisors didn't fully recognize, at least initially. What's really important is that you have the right to be yourself, but also being yourself will bring the right things to the tables you're around, the workplaces that you're in, so that we are getting that diverse representation and programming that is needed, because we are being our true and most authentic selves. And finally, I can't really end with anyone but Dadi, but she did get her grandchild. And here they are last year at her 93rd birthday, Seth, my son, and her. So she got what her ultimate was, which was to become a great grandma as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dhikshana. That was absolutely amazing and inspirational as always, and how apt for you to be talking about how you claimed space and utilise your networks at a Space Invaders seminar. I think that was really honest, and it was really fantastic that you shared your journey with us. One of the questions that's come in so far, and we'll have to be quite quick on the questions now, but we'll hopefully have time after the breakouts, is for Dhikshana. What did you do in the time between Brent and Somerset House that helped you to recover and feel confident enough again to go for your next senior role?
When I applied to Somerset House, I was still at Brent at that time, and I actually went into the interview really doubting that I would get it or be it. But I actually talked about the experience. I didn't go into details, but I talked about the importance of culture, and especially when you're being hired to run a program around developing young people and diversifying the sector, it felt really important that if I'm going to tell them, they should talk honestly about those things that I did. I found at the time I didn't have a mentor. My mentorship with Sire had ended, and I was kind of in this weird phase while I was trying to work out what my next mentor would be. And I found solace in people that I really kind of admired, and I spoke to them. Actually, Sharon, I spoke to you quite a lot about it on a trip we were doing around the Learning and Engagement Manifesto. And I saw lots of different voices. Not all of them are there to build you up, but it's just re-getting those perspectives. But that ancestor gut comment that a curator called Shasti Loughton from Museum Detox actually said to me, which was, yeah, in my interview for Brent, I had a doubt about the role, but I didn't listen. I just was like, I got caught up in the program, and I should have listened then. I wouldn't have put myself through it. But I think it was just taking that time, and it fell around Christmas, and I just stopped working. I stopped doing everything, and I just had a break and spent time with my family and friends, and just tried to just refine myself. And I went into the role, started the role, and slowly I kind of build that confidence back up now. And yeah, hopefully that helps. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic and great to be so honest. And it really reminded me when you were speaking, I put the quote in the chat of the quote from Audre Lorde, the amazing feminist activist campaigner, who said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare, which always kind of makes me feel strong if I'm thinking, why am I indulging myself with these acts of self-preservation and self-care? It's really important that we do them. So I'm just going to pause now while we go to the breakouts, because we're running behind my very tight self-imposed schedule. We will have time, I think, for reflections with the panel and questions at the end, but we now should be automatically put into breakout rooms. The question that we want you to reflect on, and these are self-facilitated breakout rooms, is about how you will go about unlocking your power. So what are the strategies that you're going to put in place for unlocking your power? So if you can, when you get in the room, introduce yourself. There'll be 2 or 3 other people in that room. Introduce yourselves, and then you've got around 12 minutes to talk about your strategies for unlocking your power. So welcome back. I think everyone is now back from the breakouts. We had a brilliant conversation in the room that I was in, which really centered on authenticity and the points that you made, Dhikshana, about that, about how we also protect ourselves a little bit, so that whilst we can bring our whole selves to work and to our work experience, then if we're doing that and bringing our whole self and our self-identity to that's not put under the microscope, and it's not a case of being overexposed, if you like. Some really interesting chats about networks, what networks we're in and how we use them. Also something about the idea of solidarity, I think, which is an interesting idea that's popping up in a lot of conversations I'm having in the sector now. And I know there is a small network around solidarity in the museum and heritage worlds that's come into being very recently. And then a question, I'm going to put this question to Mel and Dhikshana. about tools, techniques, and tips to build confidence and to enable and empower us to present ourselves authentically. So that's a question for Dhikshana and Mel. What tools, techniques, and tips do we have that would enable us to build our confidence and present ourselves authentically? I don't know which of you wants to go first on that. I know you've been slightly put on the spot, but I'm sure between the two of you, you can come up with some answers to that. And whilst they're thinking on that, I'm just going to say, can people put feedback and comments into the chat from the breakout rooms? Because we had a fantastic conversation in ours. It was just the beginning of a conversation, I feel. But I'm just curious to know what other conversations took place, and also whether you've got any questions for Mel or myself or Dhikshana. So tools, tips, techniques. Dhikshana.
Wow, this is a whole talk about it. Now I'm like, my mind has gone blank. But I think we talked about it in our breakout room. I really do think mentors are such an important part, and I found it so useful to have them. I think it creates a space where you can share how you're feeling or ideas, even if you have a programming idea, but share it in a space that isn't your family or your workspace or anything like that. I think also what the most useful parts of mentoring that I found is sometimes I'll be like, this thing happened at work, and I'll be really angry and upset about it, and the mentor, being like, well, let's unpack that. And then by the end, realizing it's not as big or as bad as I thought, but other times being like, this thing happened, and then being like, right, let's work through like how you find that. I think for me, that safe space and like having a space to talk about it is really important. But also always being quite action focused. So like thinking about what I want that mentor session to be about, like what's the focus for it, and also what I'm taking away from it. So then I can go and either I'm implementing something or I'm kind of challenging myself to change something if that's the case. So yeah, my first thing, I guess that's a tip, I'm not sure, it would be find a mentor. And usually the networks you're in, like joining them will help you, meet lots of people and work out who that is, but you might already know who it is. And genuinely, someone was in the group was saying like, should we just email them? And I was like, yeah, email the person that you want to be their mentor and say to them, maybe we could meet every 8 weeks, and this is how I can lead it. I'll do all the planning, I'll do all the stuff, so you're not making the mentor do that work. And most people, I imagine, would be up for that. And for me, having a mentor that has lived experience like me was important as well, especially in my first mentorship, because it was something that I don't think I really identified till I joined Museum Detox. So I will stop talking there and hand over to Mel.
Thank you, Dhikshana. So that's the first top tip or technique or tool. Get yourself a mentor. People are saying in the chat as well that at the Museums Association, obviously, we have done emergency mentoring during the pandemic, and we have the AMA, and also Space Invaders has done some, facilitated some mentoring schemes as well. So there are schemes through networks and associations such as the AMA. Mel, did you have any tips you want to share?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I would agree with Dhikshana. I think that other people can be a real confidence boost. So I think it is good to talk to people, and it doesn't need to be a mentor. It can be a friend or a colleague or your family. I think, talking to other people does help. But I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and two things that I've been thinking about when I've been pushing myself recently is thinking about what's the worst that can happen. It's usually not really that bad. And the other thing is about focusing on what will change as a result of what you want to do. And I think really keeping that in mind, like sort of envisioning what it is that impact really can help you to step over that sort of confidence barrier.
I think that's a brilliant one. I quite often think to myself when I'm thinking, am I going to do this? Can I force myself to do this? Is this the right thing to do? What is the worst that can happen? And at the end of the day, we're not working in A&E, we're working in museums, and they can be life-changing. That's what we say at the Museums Association. Museums do change lives. We've got a manifesto for change as Museum Space Invaders. We can be life-changing, but generally, if we think about what the worst that can happen is, it's not that bad, and we can make positive change. There's an interesting question in the chat about trust. So from Catherine Alston, in our group, we talked about trust, how trust can impact confidence and the way we use power. Would either of you like to comment on that? That is a really interesting question. I don't know if it's thinking about who we trust, and who we trust with our whole self if we're thinking about bringing our whole self into a work environment. Any comments, Mel or Dhikshana?
I can touch upon, it was actually trust, I think that was one of the biggest things that when I was at Brent that I struggled with, because I didn't feel trusted to that. I didn't feel believed in to lead what I needed to lead. And as that carried on for a while, my confidence got lower and lower, and my ability to have power. And my whole job was to empower young people to believe and have trust in me. But I didn't have that, I guess. And so I think it's such an important, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think it's such an important thing to think about if you are in a position of power, like how you create that space to enable people to feel that they can own something and have trust, because that is what affects how they will then play that out in their job as well, I guess. So I don't think it really answers the question, but it was something I felt and I really struggled with, and I even more with my own team tried to create that space of trust.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, isn't it? And I think it does come back again to networks as well. So whether that's an identity network or a network where people have got something in common on a work issue, work-related issue, then having people around you that you can trust in those networks as a second pair of eyes, as you so eloquently said, Dhikshana, feeling like you've got hundreds of people behind you when you walk into a room, if it might be a hostile space or a space of challenge, I think is really important. I'm just going to share something quickly from the chat, because I think this is a really good point. I know it was raised earlier about women talking about losing power when they become parents, and somebody, Emma, has put in a link to a blog on that, which I suspect will be really useful. I presume we're capturing the chat on this somewhere and can share that link as well. But as I know, all three of us are parents on this panel, can you talk a little bit about power and how that becoming a parent has impacted and what mechanisms you've used? Because for me, it felt like being a split personality when I went back to work 4 days a week after having my child, and she was only 5.5 months old when I went back to work, and you feel kind of, as if you're split in two completely. So how do we do all of that? And as somebody else has said, and join a network and support ourselves and develop ourselves and find mentors and coaches. How do we do all of that? Mel?
That's a really good question. I work part-time, and I think that allows me to do all of the other things that I'm interested in, but that does have implications. And I think that I am not as powerful in my workplace because I work part-time. I'm not on, I'm not in the room all of the time like other people are. But it does allow me to follow my interests, but that's not an option for everyone. And I think there's just this kind of, I don't know, I think that actually the last little while has helped with this too, because it's become like your children are much more present in your life, and everyone has to, take that into account now in a different way. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, actually. I think I'm just living sort of on the edge, actually.
But I think you make a good point there about how working practice has changed over the course of the last 13, 14 months. And we've all had a little glimpse into other people's homes and lives. For example, I'm well acquainted with Dhikshana's booze cabinet, which is permanently behind her on a Zoom call. But also, on a serious note, other people's lives, families, pets, spaces, pressures just become much more evident. And again, we've had to think from a leadership point of view as the Museums Association, as an employer, how are we a progressive employer in that situation when there's pressure on the organisation? How do we support people to have a better work-life balance? And that was one of our top priorities as we went into the pandemic, was supporting staff and supporting staff well-being. And I think that idea of well-being is on the lips of many leaders and many organisations now, because they've realised that they need people in order to deliver in the sector in particular, and that museums are just storehouses or stuff if you don't have audiences and staff and volunteers and freelancers and trustees and all of the amazing people that surround them. So I think we are coming just about to the end. We've got 2 minutes. So all of the chat's been captured. Links will be sent around after the event to all of the delegates. I'm going to ask Mel and Dhikshana for just one sort of closing thought, and we literally have got 1 minute in which to do it, and then I'm going to bring it to an end. So who wants to go first? I'm not even going to ask Dhikshana.
Closing thought. I think just from listening today, I think it's about, if you put yourself first and look after yourself first, then you can connect and do everything else and then share that power forward. But also, if you've ever been given that moment or chance, just paying it forward, if we all pay it forward, it's going to become a ripple effect and it will have a great impact.
Thank you. Brilliant. Mel?
I think the things that came out of Dhikshana's talk and also the group I was in was really about the power of connecting with others and how we need to keep talking to each other.
Brilliant. This has been a fantastic session, actually. You've all indulged in some self-care and self-preservation by signing up for this event, by coming along, by bringing your whole self, for being honest and thinking about what steps you need to take to unlock your power. So this is the first step on that journey of unlocking your power. I hope I'm going to see you in Zoom rooms, in real life, in a museum soon. And I hope we'll be able to share our journey, our experiences, and create change for ourselves and for the wider sector. Thank you very much.